Evet, değerli Art TV izleyenleri ve dinleyenleri, şimdi Newton'un yazdığı medeniyet tarihine dair bir küçük klasiği, yani Newton'un kronolojisini okuma niyetiyle başladığım evvelki sunumumda biraz da irticalen söz söylemenin şehvetine kapılarak konuyu azıcık değiştirdim ve İngilizce devam ettiğim konuşmamda yani Newton'dan gayrı neredeyse her şeye değindim. Şimdi aslında konuşurken belki biraz daha bir metne bağlı kalıp da doğaçlama tarzına daha az yönelirsem belki konuşmalarımın tutarlılığı, disiplini ve insicamı daha sıkı olur ama bu defa da öyle bir yöntem tutturduğumda hakikaten de içerikleri çok kuru oluyor. Adeta TRT'nin haber bültenlerine benziyor. Dolayısıyla birazcık da mizahi öğeler, doğaçlamalar, biraz tuluat olmalı. Biraz tuluat orta oyunu, meddah üslubu da olmalı. Şimdi biraz tabii mizah olmalı. Ama ikisinin de bir ölçüsü, kıvamı ve ahengi tutturulmalı ki bu sunumlar ne çok kuru, didaktik ve adeta ders kitaplarının iticiliğinde olmalı, ne de Cem Yılmaz'ın cıvıklığı ve seviyesizliği ölçüsünde olmalı. Yani şimdi bir yandan bir takım bilgileri ve esinlenmeleri, ilhamı meraklısına aktarırken diğer yandan da bunu yaptığım esnada ciddiyetin yanına birazcık neşe, eğlence katmalıyım ki bu programların bir albenisi olsun. Bunu izleyen ve izlemesi muhtemel kitleyi bir noktadan yakalayıp daha ciddi konulara eğilmeleri doğrultusunda bir teşvikte bulunayım. Yani şimdi benim tabii yaptığım birçok şey bir ölçüye ve hesaba istinad ettiği için bu Art TV'nin yayınlarının üslubunda da ben bu ahenge riayet etmeye çalışıyorum. Fakat elimde değil. Bazen ölçünün ibresi kuru, sıkıcı ve didaktik tarafı gösteriyor. Bazen de sulu, şakacı ve komedi üslubuna doğru e, kayıyor. Şimdi tabii bunu böyle söyledikten sonra bunun son derece deneysel ve avantgard bir sanat ve bilim ve tefekkür faaliyeti olduğunu da belirterek hoş görülmesini, mazur görülmesini rica ederim. Şimdi bunları böyle söyledikten sonra arkama da yaslanamıyorum çünkü arkada kediler dolanıyor. Şimdi kedileri de ezmek istemiyorum. Şimdi for English speakers, I want to introduce and read out the summary of one of the greatest geniuses of humankind, Sir Isaac Newton's Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms Amended. Now, I got this piece of text from where? I got it from internet, and more particularly the project Gutenberg ebook of the Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms Amended by Isaac Newton. This ebook is for the use of anyone, anywhere, at no cost, and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away, or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook, or online at www.gutenberg.net. Title: The Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms Amended, to which is prefixed a short chronicle from the first memory of things in Europe to the conquest of Persia by Alexander the Great. Author Isaac Newton. Release date May 7, 2005. Ebook number 15784. Language English. Character set encoding ISO 88591. Produced by Robert Shimin, Kite Atkins, and the online distributed proof reading team. Now, before passing to reading this minor classic of Sir Isaac Newton's of concerning humanities and history, I should deliver a brief speech about its significance. First of all, most of us think that Sir Isaac Newton was a scientist and physicist relatively less people know about his inquiry and work about history. Now, this book of history, however, also carries the mark of his physical, astronomical thinking, in the sense that he checks out the consequences and results of his dating of certain historical events by transferring knowledge gathered from astronomy. So his approach to knowledge is not narrow in the sense of most people. On the contrary, his approach to science and knowledge is a unitarian and holistic way of looking universe. Some people who remarked about Newton's personality and scientific significance remarked that he was both a scientist, an artist, and a creative artist, and also an genius calculator Also, probably he was very skillful at making things and testing things, and he combined all sorts of different virtues and qualities, skills and intellect in one man. Another interesting feature of Newton is that obviously we cannot check out its validity, that he he stayed he stayed virgin for a lifetime. Now this astonishing record is also very interesting about a man who in the end an animal an animal with brutal instincts, and of course urge to have sex, procreate like many mortals. However, these kind of these kinds of men are more than normal men, and they create sort of categories by their personality alone. Therefore, if we judge and make discretions about these individuals in our ordinary and mortal values and evaluations, most certainly we would have make very grave injustices to extraordinary talents and merits and virtues of these sorts of men. Therefore, mortals are on the one side and these kinds of men are on the other side. However, we as mortals have the means and legal legal permission by some legal authority of distributing, using, interpreting and playing with these humanitarian issues which have been not constrained by copyright considerations, and that is understandable. Why understandable? Because it was written in 18th century. More particularly, it was written in the year of 1007 1728. 1728. In Roman numerals, it is written as appears in this text. The date starts with an M, which is 1000, continues from left to right with a D, which is 500, and continues with a C, which means 100, continues with another C, which is 100, which makes, by way of addition, 1000 700, and the Roman numerals progress from left to right by the addition of two x's, which makes 10 plus 10, 20. Therefore, 1720, and also there is a V sign, which means 5, which makes it 1725, and continuing from left to right, we have 3 eyes, which makes it 1728, which is the date of publication of this minor classic of Sir Isaac Newton. It was printed in London, printed for J. Thomson in the Strand and J. Osborne and T. Longman in Paternoster Row. And let me open a parenthesis and remark about something, that even though I speak English and translated many difficult texts from Turkish to English and English to Turkish, I have never been abroad of Turkey in this life, which started from 1978. That means I am nearly fully 40 years old, and of course I never traveled to England, nor did I set my feet to London, just as Sir Isaac Newton never traveled abroad from England. However, he had the liberty to comment and write about the countries which he never saw with his eyes or a telescope. However, he might have seen these countries by way of reasoning and reason. In other words, he as if saw these countries by his sense and sensorium, and not with his senses. Therefore, if some may criticize me for being too speculative about the things and places which I have never been and examined, I may show the example of Sir Isaac Newton being, for his lifetime, within the boundaries of England, yet he wrote some books which enlightened the entire world, including me, without being anywhere outside Turkey, and got to know Newton's texts via an internet facility, and acquiring these texts through internet. Now I want to proceed on to Newton's text. However, before Newton there was a foreword, and that foreword is written by John Conduit, and I want to present this incredible and rhetorical masterpiece of John Conduit, which John Conduit presents Newton's work to the important people of England. In other words, if we translate it in some sense, he presented this valuable and precious work to persons of importance, however, probably not valuable in the scale of Newton. However, they are important persons of being the leading persons of England, the protocol of England. Therefore, he has to make some lip service in order that the real genius might appear in probably book form. Now, this kind of work, which is indeed lip service and rhetoric, is also very important, perhaps as important as Newton's scientific and scholarly work, because if there were no John Conduits, how would Newton, an introverted person, might have make his public relations with legal authority, political authorities, to make his jewelry known. Now, therefore, if you criticize the lip service of John Conduit, I beg you to have a bit of tolerance, because the work of the like of John Conduit is also very important in science lobbying. Now, let me read, if I can get rid of this small cat kitten. To the Queen, Madam, as I could never hope to write anything myself worthy to be laid before your Majesty, I think it a very great happiness that it should be my lot to usher into the world, under your sacred name, the last work of as great a genius as any age ever produced, an offering of such value in itself as to be in no danger of suffering from the meanness of the hand that presents it. The impartial and universal encouragement which your Majesty has always given to arts and sciences entitles you to the best returns the learned world is able to make, and the many extraordinary honors your Majesty, who saved the author of the following sheets, give you a just right to his productions. These, above the rest, lay the most particular claim to your royal protection, for the Chronology had never appeared in its present form without your Majesty's influence, and the short chronicle which precedes it is entirely owing to the commands with which you were pleased to honor him out of your singular care for the education of the royal issue and earnest desire to form their minds betimes and lead them early into the knowledge of truth. The author has himself acquainted the public that the following treatise was the fruit of his vacant hours, and the relief he sometimes had recourse to when tired with his other studies. What an idea, what an idea does it raise of his abilities to find that a work of such labor and learning as would have been a sufficient employment and glory for the whole life of another was to him diversion only, and amusement. The subject is in its nature incapable of that demonstration upon which his other writings are founded, but his usual accuracy and judiciousness are here no less observable. At the same time, he supports his suggestions with all the authorities and proves that the whole compass of science can furnish. He offers them with the greatest caution, and by a modesty that was natural to him and always accompanies such superior talents, sets a becoming example to others not to be too presumptuous in matters so remote and dark. Though the subject be only chronology, yet as the mind of the author abounded with the most extensive variety of knowledge, he frequently intersperses observations of a different kind and occasionally instills principles of virtue and humanity which seem to have been always uppermost in his heart, and as they were the constant rule of his actions, appear remarkably in all his writings. Here your majesty will see astronomy and a just observation on the course of nature assisting other parts of learning to illustrate antiquity, and a penetration and sagacity peculiar to the great author, dispelling that mist with which fable and error had darkened it, and will with pleasure contemplate the first dawnings of your favorite arts and sciences, the noblest and most beneficial of which he alone carried farther in a few years than all the most learned who went before him had been able to do in many ages. Here too, madam, you will observe that an abhorrence of idolatry and persecution, the very essence and foundations of that religion which makes so bright a part of your majesty's character, was one of the earliest laws of the divine legislator, the morality of the first ages, and the primitive religion of both Jews and Christians. And as the author adds, ought to be the standing religion of all nations, it being for the honor of God and good of mankind, nor will your majesty be displeased to find his sentiments so agreeable to your own. Whilst he condemns all oppression and every kind of cruelty, even to brute beasts, and with so much warmth inculcates mercy, charity, and the indispensable duty of doing good and promoting the general welfare of mankind, those great ends for which government was first instituted, and to which alone it is administered in this happy nation under a king who distinguished himself early in opposition to the tyranny which threatened Europe, and chooses to reign in the hearts of his subjects, who by his innate benevolence and paternal affection to his people establishes and confirms all their liberties, and by his valor and magnanimity guards and defends them. that sincerity and openness of mind, which the darling quality of this nation, is become more conspicuous by being placed upon the throne, and we see with pride our sovereign, the most eminent, for a virtue by which our country is so desirous to be distinguished. A prince whose views and hearts are above all the mean arts of disguise is far out of the reach of any temptation to introduce blindness and ignorance, and as His Majesty is, by his incessant personal cares, dispensing happiness at home and peace abroad. You, madam, lead us lead us on by your great example to the most noble use of that quiet and ease which we enjoy under his administration, whilst all your hours of leisure are employed in cultivating in yourself that learning which you so warmly patronize in others. Your Majesty does not think the instructive pursuit and entertainment below your exalted station, and are yourself a proof that the abstruser parts of it are not beyond reach of your sex. Nor does the study and the barren speculation. It discovers itself in a steady attachment to true religion, in liberality, beneficence, and all those amiable virtues which increase and heighten the felicities of a throne at the same time that they bless all around it. Thus, madam, to enjoy, together with the highest state of public splendor and dignity, all the retired pleasures and domestic blessings of private life, is the perfection of human wisdom as well as happiness. The good effects of this love of knowledge will not stop with the present age. It will diffuse its influence with advantage to late posterity. And what may we not anticipate in our minds for the generations to come under royal progeny, so descended, so educated, and formed by such patterns? The glorious prospect gives us abundant reason to hope that liberty and learning will be perpetuated together, and that the bright examples of virtue and wisdom set in this realm by the royal patrons of both will be transmitted with the scepter to their posterity, till this and other works of Sir Isaac Newton shall be forgot, and time itself be no more, which is the most sincere and ardent wish of, madam, may it please your Majesty. Your Majesty's most obedient and most dutiful subject and servant, John Conduit. Now, this kind of rhetorical piece and text reminds me that the saying that one person is more Catholic than the Pope himself. Now, I always have a sneaky suspicion of people praising somebody more than the praised person believes that he or she has a real virtue of being praised. Now, this is this uh, piece of this piece of rhetorical exercise, I think, just fits in that kind of behavior. However, certainly it serves a purpose because perhaps it was the way which perhaps it was the way which the works could have been supported and perhaps printed. Now, therefore, sincerity or coherence to truth perhaps may not be regarded as a criteria. However, if it works and acquires the result, which seems to have acquired the result because we have the book, although it is in ebook form. Now, if we will benefit from that book, it's partly because John Conduit's lip service being applied in a foreword. Now, let's start to read the content of the short chronicle. In other words, the summary of the real work. Dakika. The contents, a short chronicle from the first memory of things in Europe to the conquest of Persia by Alexander the Great, the chronology of ancient kingdoms amended, chapter 1 of the chronology of the first ages of the Greeks, chapter 2 of the empire of Egypt, chapter 3 of the Assyrian Empire, chapter 4 of the two contemporary empires of the Babylonians and Medes, chapter 5 a description of the Temple of Solomon, chapter 6 of the empire of the Persians. Advertisement. Though the chronology of ancient kingdoms amended was written by the author many years since, yet he lately revised it and was actually preparing it for the press at the time of his death. But the short chronicle was never intended to be made public, and therefore was not so lately corrected by him. To this the reader must impute it if he shall find any places where the short chronicle does not accurately agree with the dates assigned in the larger piece. The sixth chapter was not copied out with the other five, which makes it doubtful whether he intended to print it. But being found among his papers posthumously, that means after his death, among his papers, usually when men of letters, writers, etc. die, they leave a chunk of tomes which are analyzed and studied over if that person is a valuable and important person. Sometime later, scholars make some studies of concerning papers left, and as far as we know, Newton also left a lot of documents behind, and since Newton is one of the leading geniuses of humankind, probably they were studied very intensely, but unfortunately I have no detailed and accurate knowledge of these. and evidently appearing to be a continuation of the same work, and as such, abridged in the short chronicle, it was thought proper to be added. Had the great author himself lived to publish this work, there would have been no occasion for this advertisement, but as it is, the reader is desired to allow for such imperfections as are inseparable from posthumous pieces, and in so great a number of proper names to excuse some errors of the press that have escaped. A short chronicle from the first memory of things in Europe to the conquest of Persia by Alexander the Great. The introduction. The Greek antiquities are full of poetical fictions, because the Greeks wrote nothing in prose before the conquest of Asia by Cyrus the Persian. Then Pherekides, Skyrius, and Cadmus Milesius introduced writing in prose. Pherekides Atheniensis, about the end of the Rhine Darius Hystaspes, wrote of antiquities and digested his work by genealogies, and was reckoned one of the best genealogers. Epimenides, the historian, proceeded also by genealogies, and Hellenicus, who was 12 years older than Herodotus, digested his history by the ages or successions of the priestesses of Juno Argiva. Others digested theirs by the kings of the Lacedaemonians or Archons of Athens. Hippias the Elean, about 30 years before the fall of the Persian Empire, published a breviary or list of the Olympic victors, and about 10 years before the fall thereof, Ephorus, the disciple of Isocrates, formed the chronological history of Greece, beginning with the return of the Heraclides into Peloponnesus and ending with the siege of Perinthus in the 20th year of Philip, the father of Alexander the Great. But he digested things by generations, and the reckoning by Olympiads was not yet in use, nor did it appear that the reigns of kings were yet set down by numbers of years. The Arundelian marbles were composed 60 years after the death of Alexander the Great on 4 Olymp 128, and yet he mentioned not the Olympiads, but in the next Olympiad, Timaeus Siculus published an history in several books down to his own times, according to the Olympiads, comparing the Ephori, the kings of Sparta, the archons of Olympiads, comparing the Ephori, the kings of Sparta, the archons of Athens, and the priestesses of Argos with the Olympic victors, so as to make the Olympiads and the genealogies of successions of kings, archons, and priestesses and poetical histories suit with one another, according to the best of his judgment. And where he left off, Polybius began and carried on the history. So then, a little after the death of Alexander the Great, they began to set down the generations, reigns, and successions in numbers of years, and by putting reigns and successions equivalent to generations, and 3 generations, 120 years, as appears by their chronology, they have made the antiquities of Greece 3 or 400 years older than the truth. And this was the original of the technical chronology of the Greeks. Eratosthenes wrote about 100 years after the death of Alexander the Great. He was followed by Apollodorus, and these two have been followed ever since by chronologers. But how uncertain their chronology is, and how doubtful it was reputed by the Greeks of those times, may be understood by these passages of Plutarch. Some reckon that he, Lycurgus, contemporary to Iphitus, and to have been his companion in ordering the Olympic festivals. Amongst whom was Aristotle the philosopher, arguing from the Olympic disc, which had the name of Lycurgus upon it. Others substituting the times by the successions of the kings of the Lacedaemonians, as Eratosthenes and Apollodorus affirm that he was not a few years older than the first Olympiad. First Aristotle and some others made him as old as the first Olympiad. Then Eratosthenes, Apollodorus, and some others made him above 100 years older. And in another place, Plutarch tells us this. The Congress of Solon with Croesus, some think they can confute by chronology. But a history so illustrious and verified by so many witnesses, and which is more so agreeable to the manners of Solon, and so worthy of the greatness of his mind and of his wisdom, cannot persuade myself to reject because of some chronological canons, as they call them, which hundreds of authors correcting have not yet been able to constitute anything certain in which they could agree among themselves about repugnancies. It seems the chronologers had made the legislature of Solon too ancient to consist with that Congress. For reconciling such repugnancies, chronologers have sometimes doubled the persons of men. So when the poets had changed Io, the daughter of Inachus, into the Egyptian Isis, chronologers made her husband Osiris or Bacchus and his mistress Ariadne as old as Io, and so find that there were two Ariadnes, one the mistress of Bacchus and the other the mistress of Theseus, and two Minoses, their fathers, and a younger Io, the daughter of Iasus, writing Iasus corruptly for Inachus. And so they have made two Pandions, two Erecteuses, giving the name of Erectonius to the first. Homer calls the first Erecteus, and by such corruptions they have exceedingly perplexed ancient history. And for the chronology of the Latins, that is still more uncertain. Plutarch represents great uncertainties in the originals of Rome, and so doth Servius. The old records of the Latins were burnt by the Gauls 64 years before the death of Alexander the Great, and Quintus Fabius Pictor, the oldest historian of the Latins, lived 100 years later than that king. In sacred history, the Assyrian Empire began with Pul and Tiglath-Pileser and lasted about 170 years. And accordingly, Herodotus had made Semiramis only 5 generations, or about 166 years older than Nitocris, the mother of the last king of Babylon. But Stesias had made Semiramis 1,500 years older than Mitocris, and behind a long series of kings of Assyria, whose names are not Assyrian, nor have any affinity with the Assyrian names in scripture. The priests of Egypt told Herodotus that Menes built Memphis and the sumptuous temple of Vulcan in that city, and that Ramstinus, Moeris, Asihis, and Psammiticus added magnificent porticos to that temple. And it is not likely that Memphis would be famous before Homer's days, who doth not mention it, or that the temple could be above 200 or 300 years in building. The reign of Psammiticus began about 655 years before Christ, and I place the founding of this temple by Menes about 257 years earlier. But the priests of Egypt had so magnified their antiquities before the days of Herodotus as to tell him that from Menes to Moeris, who reigned 200 years before Psammiticus, there were 330 kings whose reigns took up as many ages, that is, 11,000 years, and had filled up the interval with feigned kings who had done nothing. And before the days of Diodorus Siculus, they had raised their antiquities so much higher as to place 6, 8, or 10 new reigns of kings between those kings whom they represented to Herodotus to succeed one another immediately. In the kingdom of Sicyon, chronologers have split Apis Epaphus or Epopeus into two kings, whom they call Apis and Epopeus, and between them have inserted 11 or 12 feigned names of kings who did nothing, and thereby they have made its founder Aegialeus 300 years older than his brother Phoroneus. Some have made the kings of Germany as old as the flood, and yet before the use of letters, the names and actions of men could scarcely be remembered above 80 or 100 years after their deaths, and therefore I admit no chronology of things done in Europe above 80 years before Cadmus brought letters into Europe, none of the things done in Germany before the rise of the Roman Empire. Now, since Eratosthenes and Apollodorus computed the times by the reign of the kings of Sparta, and as appears by their chronology still followed, have made the 17 reigns of these kings in both races between the return of the Heraclides into Peloponnesus and the battle of Thermopylae take up 622 years, which is after the rate of 36 and a half years to a reign, and yet a race of 17 kings of that length is nowhere to be met within all true history, and kings at a moderate reckoning reign but 18 or 20 years apiece one with another. I have stated the time of the return of the Heraclides by the last way of reckoning, placing it about 340 years before the battle of Thermopylae, and making the taking of Troy 80 years older than that return, according to Thucydides, and the Argonautic expedition, a generation older than the Trojan War and the wars of Sesostris in Thrace, and that of Ino, the daughter of Cadmus, a generation older than that expedition. I have drawn up the following chronological table so as to make chronology sweet with the course of nature, with astronomy, with sacred history, with Herodotus, the father of history, and with itself, without the many repugnancies complained of by Plutarch. I do not pretend to be exact to a year. There may be errors of 5 or 10 years, and sometimes 20, and not much above. A short chronicle from the first memory of things in Europe, the conquest of Persia by Alexander the Great. The times are set down in years before Christ. The Canaanites who fled from Joshua retired in great numbers into Egypt, and there conquered Tammuz, or Tammuz, king of the Lower Egypt, and reigned there under their kings Salatis, Boeon, Apahnas, Apophis, Janias, Asis, and etc., until the days of Eli and Samuel. They fled on flesh, and sacrificed men after the manner of the Phoenicians, and were called shepherds by the Egyptians, who lived only on the fruits of the earth, and abominated flesh eaters. The upper parts of Egypt were in those days under many kings, reigning at Coptos, Thebes, Tis, Elephantis, and other places, which by conquering one another grew by degrees into one kingdom, over which Misfragmutosis reigned in the days of Eli. In the year before Christ, 1125, Mefres reigned over the Upper Egypt from Siene to Heliopolis, and his successor Misfragmutosis made a lasting war upon the shepherds soon after, and caused many of them to fly into Palestine, Idumea, Syria, and Libya, and under Lelex, Aezeus, Inachus, Pelasgus, Aulus the first, Cecrops, and other captains into Greece. Before those days, Greece and all Europe was peopled by wandering Cimmerians and Scythians from the backside of the Euxine Sea, who lived a rambling, wild sort of life, like the Tartars in the northern parts of Asia. Of their race was Ogyges, in whose days these Egyptian strangers came into Greece. The rest of the shepherds were shut up by Misfragmutosis in a part of the lower Egypt called Abaris or Pelusium. In the year 1100, the Philistines, strengthened by the excess of the shepherds, conquer Israel and take the ark. Samuel judges Israel. 1085 before Christ. Haemon, the son of Pelasgus, reigns in Thessaly. 1080 before Christ. Lycaon, the son of Pelasgus, builds Lycosura. Phoroneus, the son of Inachus, Phoronicum, afterwards called Argos. Aegialeus, the brother of Phoroneus and son of Inachus, Aegialeum, afterwards called
Sicyon, and these were the oldest towns in Peloponnesus. Till then they built only single houses scattered up and down in the fields. About the same time Cecrops built Cecropia in Attica, afterwards called Athens, and Eleusine, the son of Ogyges, built Eleusis, and these towns gave a beginning to the kingdoms of the Arcadians, Argives, Sicyons, Athenians, Eleusinians, and etc. Deucalion flourishes. 1070 before Christ. Amosis or Thutmosis, the successor of Misfragmutosis, abolishes the Phoenician custom in Heliopolis of sacrificing men and drives the shepherds out of Abaris. By their excess, the Philistines become so numerous as to bring into the field against Saul 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and people as the sand on the seashore for multitude. Abbas, the father of Acrisius and Proetus, comes from Egypt. 1069 before Christ. Saul is made king of Israel, and by the hand of Jonathan gets a great victory over the Philistines. Eurotas, the son of Lelex, and Lacedaemon, who married Sparta, the daughter of Eurotas, began in Laconia and built Sparta. 1060. Samuel dies. 1059. David made king. 1048. The Edomites are conquered and dispersed by David, and some of them fly into Egypt with their young king Hadad. Others fly to the Persian Gulf with their commander Oannes, and others from the Red Sea to the coast of the Mediterranean, and fortify Azot against David and take Zidon. And the Zidonians who fled from them built Tyre and Aradus, and make Abibalus king of Tyre. These Edomites carry to all places their arts and sciences, amongst which were their navigation, astronomy, and letters. For in Idumea they had constellations and letters before days of Job, who mentions them, and there Moses learnt to write the law in a book. These Edomites who fled to the Mediterranean, translating the word Eritrea into that of Phoenicia, give the name of Phoenicians to themselves, and that of Phoenicia to all the seacoast of Palestine from Azot to Zidon. And hence came the tradition of the Persians and of the Phoenicians themselves, mentioned by Herodotus, that the Phoenicians came originally from the Red Sea and presently undertook long voyages on the Mediterranean. 1047 BC. Acrisius marries Eurydice, the daughter of Lacedaemon and Sparta. The Phoenician mariners who fled from the Red Sea, being used to long voyages for the sake of traffic, begin the like voyages on the Mediterranean from Zidon, and sailing as far as Greece, carry away Io, the daughter of Inachus, who with other Grecian women came to their ships to buy their merchandise. The Greek seas begin to be infested with pirates. 1046 before Christ. The Syrians of Zobah and Damascus conquered by David. Nicdemus, the son of Lycaon, resides in Arcadia. Deucalion still alive. 1045 before Christ, many of the Phoenicians and Syrians fleeing from Zidon and from David come under the conduct of Cadmus, Cilix, Phoenix, Membriarius, Nycteus, Tassus, Atimnus, and other captains into Asia Minor, Crete, Greece, and Libya, and introduce letters, music, poetry, the octaeteries, metals and their fabrication, and other arts, sciences, and customs of the Phoenicians. At this time, Cranaus, the successor of Cecrops, reigned in Attica, and in his reign and the beginning of the reign of Nyctemus, the Greeks placed the flood of Deucalion. This flood was succeeded by 4 ages or generations of men, in the first of which Chiron, the son of Saturn and Phaera, was born, and last of which, according to Hesiod, ended with the Trojan War, and so places the destruction of Troy 4 generations or about 140 years later than that flood, and the coming of Cadmus, reckoning with the ancients 3 generations to 100 years. With these Phoenicians came a sort of man skilled in the religious mysteries, arts and sciences of Phoenicia, and settled in several places under the names of Kurets, Koribants, Telchins, and Idai Dactyli. 1043 before Christ, Helen, the son of Deucalion and father of Aulus, Zutus, and Dorus, flourishes. 1035 before Christ, Erechteus reigns in Attica. Aetlius, the grandson of Deucalion and the father of Endymion, builds Elis. The Idai Dactyli find out iron in Mount Ida in Crete and work it into armor and iron tools, and thereby give a beginning to the trades of smiths and armorers in Europe. And by singing and dancing in their armor, and keeping time by striking upon one another's armor with their swords, they bring in music and poetry, and at the same time they nurse up the Cretan Jupiter in a cave of the same mountain, dancing about him in their armor. 1034 before Christ, Ammon reigns in Egypt. He conquered Libya and reduced that people from a wandering, savage life to a civil one, and taught them to lay up the fruits of the earth. And from him, Libya and the desert above it were anciently called Ammonia. He was the first that built long and tall ships with sails, and had a fleet of such ships on the Red Sea, and another on the Mediterranean at Irasa in Libya. Till then they used small and round vessels of burden, invented on the Red Sea and kept within sight of the shore. For enabling them to cross the seas without seeing the shore, the Egyptians began in his days to observe the stars, and from this beginning astronomy and sailing had their rise. Hitherto the lunisolar year had been in use, but this year being of an uncertain length, and so unfit for astronomy in his days and in the days of his sons and grandsons, by observing the heliacal risings and setting of the stars, they found the length of the solar year and made it consist of 5 days more than the 12 calendar months of the old lunisolar year. Creusa, the daughter of Erechteus, marries Zutus, the son of Helen. Erechteus, having first celebrated the Panathenaea, joins horses to a chariot. Aegina, the daughter of Azopus, the mother of Aeacus, born 1030 before Christ. Ceres, a woman of Sicily, in seeking her daughter who was stolen, comes into Attica and there teaches the Greeks to sow corn, for which benefaction she was deified after death. She first taught the art to Triptolemus, the young son of Seleucus, king of Eleusis, 1028 before Christ. Oenotrus, the youngest son of Lycaon, the Janus of the Latins, led the first colony of Greeks into Italy and there taught them to build horses. Perseus born 1020. Arcas, the son of Callisto and grandson of Lycaon, and Eumelus, the first king of Achaia, received bread corn from Triptolemus. 1019. Solomon reigns and marries daughter of Ammon, and by means of this affinity is supplied with horses from Egypt. And his merchants also bring horses from thence for all the kings of the Hittites and Syrians. For horses came originally from Libya, and thence Neptune was called Equestris. Tantalus, king of Phrygia, steals Ganymede, the son of Tros, king of Troas. 1017. Solomon, by the assistance of the Tyrians and Aradians, who had mariners among them acquainted with the Red Sea, sets out a fleet upon that sea. Those assistants built new cities in the Persian Gulf called Tyre and Aradus. 1015. The Temple of Solomon is founded. Minos reigns in Crete, expelling his father Asterius, who flees into Italy and becomes the Saturn of the Latins. Ammon takes Gezer from the Canaanites and gives it to his daughter, Solomon's wife. 1014 before Christ. Ammon places Cepheus at Joppa. 1010 before Christ. Sesach, in the reign of his father, Ammon invades Arabia Phoenix and sets up pillars at the mouth of the Red Sea. Apis Epaphus or Epopeus, the son of Phoroneus, and Nycteus, king of Boeotia, slain. Lycus inherits the kingdom of his brother Nycteus. Aetolus, the son of Endymion, flies into the country of the Curets in Achaia and calls it Aetolia, and of Pronoe, the daughter of Phorbas, begets Pleuron and Calydon, who built cities in Aetolia called by their own names. Antiopa, the daughter of Nycteus, is sent home to Lycus by Lamedon, the successor of Apis, and in the way brings forth Amphion and Zetus. 1008 before Christ. Sesach, in the reign of his father Ammon, invades Africa and Spain and sets up pillars in all his conquests, and particularly at the mouth of the Mediterranean, and returns home by the coast of Gaul and Italy. 1007 before Christ, Ceres being dead, Eumolpus institutes her mysteries in Eleusine. The mysteries of Rhea are instituted in Phrygia, in the city Cybele. About this time, temples begin to be built in Greece. Diognetus the Phrygian invents the pipe. After the example of the common council of the 5 lords of the Philistines, the Greeks set up the Amphictyonic Council, first at Thermopylae, by the influence of Amphiction, the son of Deucalion, and a few years after at Delphi, by the influence of Acrisius. Among the cities whose deputies met at Thermopylae, I do not find Athens, and therefore doubt whether Amphiction was king of that city. If he was the son of Deucalion and brother of Helen, he and Cranaus might reign together in several parts of Attica. But I meet with the later Amphiction, who entertained the great Bacchus. This council worshipped Ceres and therefore was instituted after her death. 1006 before Christ, Minos prepares a fleet, clears the Greek seas of pirates, and sends colonies to the islands of the Greeks, some of which were not inhabited before. Cecrops II resides in Attica. Chalcon teaches mysteries of Ceres in Messene. 1005 before Christ, Andromeda carried away from Joppa by Perseus. Pandion, the brother of Cecrops II, resides in Attica. Jar, the son of Phoreneus, builds a temple to Ceres. 1002 before Christ, Sesach resides in Egypt and adorns Thebes, dedicating it to his father Ammon by the name of No-Ammon or Ammon-No, that is, the people or city of Ammon, whence the Greeks called it Diospolis, the city of Jupiter. Sesach also erected temples and oracles to his father in Thebes, Ammonia, Ethiopia, and thereby caused his father to be worshipped as a god in those countries, and I think also in Arabia Felix. And this was the original of the worship of Jupiter Ammon, and the first mention of oracles that I meet with in profane history. War between Pandion and Labdacus, the grandson of Cadmus. Now, we have came to the year of 994 before Christ. However, I want to take a break and rest, and perhaps I will record it. I will record the continuation of the text some another time.